Hey everyone, it's Jason Hyland at the Sub 70 podcast, and this week's guest was Gary Evans, who played on the European Tour for a lot of years and did it in an era in the 90s, and the competition he played against over there was so good. He had so many legends playing at that time of Woosnam and Faldo and Monty and so many of those greats from that era, and the conversation I had with Gary was just fascinating. It's going to be another two-part podcast as we went over the time again, but one of my favorite interviews I've ever had a chance to do. I feel really fortunate that I get to talk to these wonderful guys and everything they've accomplished. And they couldn't be nicer, which makes it all the better. Gary is also going to be playing some Champions Tour events on the European Tour side, and he's kind of making a comeback to the game at the professional level. He's a great follow. He's at Gary Evans Pro. You can follow him on Twitter and on Instagram, and also on Facebook. He's going to be sort of documenting his process back to the game of professional golf. So give it a follow. Very articulate, very witty, very smart to follow on all forms of social media. So hope you guys really enjoy the podcast. I certainly did, and thanks for listening. Without further ado, here's Gary. Well, I would like to welcome to the Sub 70 podcast European Tour player Gary Evans. Gary, thanks for taking the time today to be with us. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
It's nice to be talking to you.
Well, you have a big birthday coming up here in February, the 50th, and I've been following you on Twitter and sort of your quest to get back to competitive golf. So my question is, how's your game? How are you feeling? And what kind of things are you working on to kind of get ready for the Champions Tour and the European side and potentially the United States side of it?
Yeah, the pre-Christmas, I'd been working really hard and on my fitness, and not that I was massively unfit, but I just know that going back to the tour, unless your legs are strong and you've got some supple movements in my lower back, I've got to be a little bit softer with my back. It's getting there, which is really good. But like I say, before Christmas, it was all kind of coming along really nicely. I was hitting quite a lot of balls. I was playing probably 3 times a week, hitting balls 3 times a week on the odd day. And then unfortunately Christmas came along, a natural sort of week to 10-day break. And then unfortunately I've had a number of things sort of fall into my lap, which has caused me not to be able to I haven't hit one shot in January, which is really quite disturbing. I run a business. I've got I represent Hugo Boss on the, with the retailers around Great Britain and Ireland. I act as an agent for them. So I've been, I had a couple of guys that were doing some work for me. Unfortunately, one of them had to leave at really an awkward time. So I've had to jump back in, work that business, because obviously it's an important business. I've got a 27-year relationship with Hugo Boss, and it's important for me to make sure that that's working correctly. But unfortunately, as a result of putting the time in there, and I've had 1 or 2 family issues, people that aren't particularly well, it's really taken my time and focus away from playing. So to be frank with you, I'm a little bit frustrated at this moment in time. There's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. I think, more or less I'll be done with everything within 2 weeks. And then from there, I really will have to throw all of my attention into practicing and playing again. It's a great shame, because I felt really, I'd organised my life to be sort of clear so that the road ahead was clear for me to just go into playing again. But sometimes life doesn't want to listen to your plans, and you just have to roll with the punches and get on with it. So that's where I am at the moment. It's a little bit frustrating.
I'm assuming there's no way if you're going to do this and be as competitive as you can be, this can't be a part-time thing. As good as those guys still all play at 50, you know what it takes to be successful on tour for a long period of time.
Sure.
And I'm assuming this go around too, it's got to be full effort if you're going to be at your absolute best.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. I mean, I talk to guys on the Champions Tour, and they're always not shocked because they know how good those guys are, but just how low they go out of the gate and how good the level of play is. On the European side and on the Champions Tour over here, of how good those players still are.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no point in me teeing it up one time unless, I'm fully committed to doing, my absolute best and give myself the best chance to, perform. I've got nothing but the greatest respect for the guys, on the Champions Tour and the Seniors Tour, Station Tour over here. Obviously over in the States, you've got a substantial tour there. You've got a lot of very well-known names that have been around for a very long time, and they are supremely good at what they do. The Station Tour is obviously relatively young from in terms of against the Champions Tour. We've got about 20, 22, 23 tournaments, I think, planned for this year, which is really good. The tour is growing, which is great. But, it's not like the old days. When you're 20, 21, 22 years of age and you turn pro, you're bulletproof. All you can think about is succeeding. Your mental attitude is all about rubbing shoulders with your heroes and trying to beat them. It's a slightly different thing when you're 49 years of age. You've been retired from the tour for 12, 13 years. You've been working in the real world, and you're going to go throw your hat back in the ring again. You've got to be prepared. And at this point in time, I'm not there. Give me another couple of months, maybe 3 months even, and I feel like I won't be a million miles away. I'm still hitting the ball, fairly decent distances. Certainly before Christmas, I was throwing in quite a lot of birdies. My short game was coming together. And mentally, I was feeling really excited and really looking forward. But like I said, sometimes life throws a curveball at you and you've just got to react. And, I've had to just get on with it. And I've had to sort of put my golf career on the back burner whilst I deal with the few problems that have come along. With a bit of luck, I'm looking to engage somebody to run my business for me going forwards in the next couple of months. I'll find the right guy. I've already had a number of people approach me, which is great. And, that will give me the freedom to put the time and the effort back into my golf, which is obviously necessary.
I also saw on Twitter you were talking about some swing changes that you wanted to make kind of as this, 2.0 of coming back to competitive golf is starting to take shape. And, technically, what were those changes that you were trying to make? And I saw a comment, I don't know if I construed this the right way, that there were some things, even when you were playing on the European Tour for all those years, being as successful as you were, that you were not, looking back, really, really happy with your golf swing, and you think it's actually kind of improving now, or there's other attributes that you kind of want to incorporate or fix as you're coming back. So what changes were those that you're trying to improve upon and make yourself better?
Well, it's basically, when I first turned pro in '92, I had a very textbook golf swing, one that had won me quite a lot of tournaments and got me to the Walker Cup and all the rest of it. And the first 6-7 months on tour, I think I was lying 6th or 7th in the merit after 6 months without a win. So I was very consistent and putting in the numbers. I broke my wrist towards the end of that year, but I didn't know that I'd broken it. And as a consequence, my game went downhill for the next 2 years. And then finally, I couldn't lift a golf club with my left hand in '94. Upon seeing 5 or 6 different specialists, nobody could really get to the bottom of it. And eventually somebody told me that I'd broken my wrist. I had reconstructive surgery when I came back from that in '95. I had to change my grip quite considerably. I went from like a 2-knuckle left hand to a 4-knuckle left hand, which completely changed the way, the ball would come off the club face. I was hitting great big hooks, and obviously that's not, as Lee Trevino once said, you can talk to a fade, but a hook won't listen. And basically, I had to find a way to play the game from 95 until 2006 when I retired. And I had to manipulate an awful lot of my body movement in order to get the club face square at impact with any consistency. And it was a golf swing that I hated. I mean, I just did not like the look of my golf swing, but to a degree, it was effective. I think in 02 and 03, I had more top tens, I think, than anybody else in Europe for 2 years. I actually got my game to a reasonable standard, but, I was frustrated because I didn't feel that I could really quite hit the shots that I wanted to hit, really, which was down to the golf swing. So when I quit in 06, I took a year out. I didn't hit a golf shot for a year. And my friends gave me a hard time, and they eventually got me to get my golf clubs out. And with a clear mind and with a clear picture in my mind of what a golf swing was supposed to be, I think I shot 2 under par the first round of golf I played. And ever since then, really, for the last 10, 11 years, I've tried very hard to get my golf swing to a place where it should be. So technically, what I used to do was my left arm would work too far away from me in the backswing. And as a consequence, I'd have quite a steep left arm at the top of my swing and quite laid off, which is actually quite amusing because nowadays it's become the popular thing, isn't it? I mean, like...
Exactly, yeah.
But, this is something that I didn't like. And I had to really pull my hands down, clear my body very hard, and squeeze the shot out at the bottom to hit the little fade, which is what I used to love playing with. But it put an awful lot of strain on my body swinging that way. So since then, what I've been trying to do, and now that I've been putting the time in prior to Christmas, and it was really starting to come along a treat, I was trying to make sure that my left hand and my left arm were working closer to my body in the backswing, the first half of the backswing. So the club head wasn't getting behind my hands, so I wasn't, getting behind it and getting, ugly trapped. But I was actually turning away together, my left arm coming with my torso. And as a consequence, my left arm was more across my body. It looked slightly flatter, if you like, from behind. And I was getting the club pretty much on target and at the top of the golf swing. And from there, I could unload really at the inside of the golf ball, which is something that I haven't been able to do, for a very, very long time. And, as a consequence, I'm hitting the ball slightly higher. I'm hitting the ball slightly further. And it's starting to feel comfortable. I've never been since I broke my wrist, I'd hit a 3-iron and 4-iron knee high to a grasshopper. But now I'm hitting 3-iron and 4-iron with a little bit of flight. And, don't get me wrong, it's not towering inferno. It's not coming down like a butterfly with sore feet, but I'm getting some trajectory with a 3-iron and 4-iron. And that's given me a bit of confidence. So I feel like if I keep working towards that and trust it, then I think I will have pretty much every shot back in the armory. Whereas whilst for the majority of my time on the main tour, between 95 and 2006, really all I had was, a low fade. I couldn't comfortably hit a soft high draw with any club in the bag because of how poor my golf swing was. And you may ask, well, why didn't I change it back then? Which would be a very good question. But, when you're trying to earn a living and when you don't have a great deal of I should say, trust in too many coaches, you find a way. And, I managed to find a way to get the ball round. It wasn't comfortable. I didn't really like it, but I got something of a result which was consistent, which was enough for me.
In a roundabout way, is the golf swing you have now feel more like your golf swing you had when you were an amateur? In other words, more your natural swing. Right. Yes. Is it funny how it kind of comes back to when you first started playing and how I think everyone kind of has a natural golf swing, and it sounds like you've sort of just refound that position of the club where you're comfortable playing and not having to do any manipulation that your body is essentially not comfortable doing. Obviously, you have the talent that you could make that other swing work, but it sounds like it's more of the natural way you want to play golf.
Absolutely. I mean, the last kind of 10 years, you go out and play golf with your pals, which is fun. There's no pressure, and it doesn't matter what you do or where you hit it. You're just going out there and having fun. And I think that that's helped me. There's no question when you get on tour, all of us professional golfers, we all go a bit nutty. We all go a bit mad. We all get a bit crazy with the game because the game beats you up, or it can beat you up every single day if you allow it to. And you've got to have an incredibly strong mind for that not to happen. And honestly, the guys that you see week in, week out, the guys that have been up there year in, year out, are the guys that are incredibly strong-willed. They have very positive minds, and they don't allow negativity into their games. They find a way. They find a way to dig it out of the dirt. I've seen a lot of young players come along who've got tons of talent, but they don't have the mental stamina to withstand the abuse that the game hands out on a day-to-day basis. Mentally, I feel in a good place with myself, number one. Number two, I don't have any particular expectation of how I'm going to perform against my former colleagues. So I can't fail. I can only succeed. I can go out there, I can give it my best shot, and that's how I feel going into this year. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to being on a golf course again. I'm looking forward to catching up with my old friends. I'm looking forward to competing again. So there's very little room in my mind for negativity at this point. I'm really feeling positive, even though the last month, I haven't really been able to put the time in.
Spring is only 48 days away or so there is hope through this cold weather at the end of the tunnel here. And if you get the itch to try some new clubs for 2019, our demo program on the Sub 70 Golf website is up and going. You can try all of our latest, greatest clubs. You go to www.golfsub70.com. Take a look. Any questions that you have, let us know. But it's a very easy and reasonable way to put new clubs to try in your hand and give us any feedback of how they work for you. Thanks again for listening, and hope you enjoy the rest of the podcast with Gary. Growing up in the south part of England, in an area that has some really great golf courses and history of play, how did you start playing as a youngster, and who introduced you to the game, and how did that progression kind of come about?
I was lucky. Basically, my parents ran a pub on the south coast, and about three-quarters of a mile away was the school along the promenade, my first school that I went to. And occasionally, some afternoons, on a summer's day, my father, who didn't play any sport, would take me onto the putting green just to kill, an hour of the afternoon, and spend some time with me, because my parents spent most of their life working. They didn't really have a great deal of time for sort of family stuff. And so I kind of got used to putting there. And as a growing child, I'd played any game with a ball: tennis, table tennis, squash, cricket, football, everything. And by the time I kind of got to 13, 14, my father said, Gary, you're going to have to play one game instead of all of these games. You'll never be great at all of them, but you might be great at one, so pick one. And the reason why I picked golf was simple. I could play it on my own. with pretty much all the other games, you needed people to play with. And because I lived in the middle of town and most of my friends, school friends, lived out of town, it was difficult to get to play with people. So I joined the golf club at 12 years of age, and I would go up the golf club. I could practice on my own. I could play 36 holes on my own. But then, there's a little junior section there, and I started making a few friends there. So I would spend literally, 8 o'clock in the morning Saturday to 8 o'clock at night Sunday at the golf club, playing and practicing, and I loved it. So it was very easy, and you kind of grow up in a very safe and secure area, and obviously you learn the rules of the game and the rules of the club, and just the honesty and the integrity of it all, and it's a good place for kids to grow up. It's a shame that more kids don't get into it, really.
Was it a links style golf course that you grew up playing?
A downland course, so it was on the South Downs. It's Worthing Golf Club, so it was quite open, built on chalk, quite windy, it was kind of linksy, but up and down hills, if you know what I mean. It was quite open, but there was a lot of great golf courses, Littlehampton, Rye. There's a load of sort of link-style golf courses along the south coast, right the way to Kent to Royal St George's, where the Open was, and Littlestone and places like that. I was fortunate. I was very fortunate. There's a lot of good golf courses in the area.
I've had the pleasure of playing Littlestone, Rye, and Royal St. George. I thought Rye was one of the greatest days I've ever had playing golf. I absolutely fell in love with that golf course, and that's as good as it gets to me right there. It's so creative. It's amazing.
How you come over and play a golf course like Rye, and so many people would look at a place like that really don't know that much about golf and go, "Ooh, that doesn't look very nice." But when you get to see the nuances of golf course like that, and it's so natural, so beautiful, so sort of untouched by man, if you like. It's just a pleasure to play places like that, and unfortunately there's not enough of those kind of golf courses around the world, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, growing up in the Midwest in the United States, everything's basically parkland, and then I started getting on this trend of, links golf, and I think we were over there in 05 or 06, and I knew I would like it, but I found it so creative, and you're never hitting the same shot twice, and the way you had to think about it. I think links golf is the most natural, beautiful way to play golf. It's so if you have an art, I can see shots in links golf that you don't see or you don't have in parkland style golf, and I just find it much more appealing personally.
Absolutely. I mean, you can open up your imagination. You can hit any shot with any club, and you can do it. Whether it's chip and runs with 4 irons, from 120 yards into a howling gale, or whether you're hitting a wedge, 160 yards downwind, pitching it 40 yards short, trying to let it run. You've got to be imaginative, and I think Phil Mickelson's one of the guys that absolutely loves the challenge that links golf provides. But I'll never forget who I was playing with. Jeepers crikey! I was playing the Open Championship one year at Royal St George's. I was playing with one of the Americans. Oh, he was so funny. I can't remember his name now. It wasn't Jerry Kelly, but it was one of the guys like that. And we were walking up 17, I think, at Royal St George's, and it was pretty windy. It wasn't very nice. It was a sunny day, but it was windy. And he says, "Geez," he says, this is the last Open I'm ever playing. I said, "Why is that?" He says, "Dude," he says, "you can hit it down the middle of the fairway, and when you get up to your ball, you find yourself, a yard in the rough." He says, "These humps and hollows, it's just not fair." And I just laughed. It was just funny because he's not wrong. He's not wrong. It's not fair per se, but it is what it is, and it's the challenge. And the humps and hollows, and the lies that you get at links golf. That's what it's all about. It's not perfect. whereas you go to somewhere like Augusta and it's all laid out in front of you, and it's like, beautiful fairways and perfect shots, and really you've got to hit perfect shots, otherwise you're not going to get anywhere.
Well, I'm with you that I think that's the beauty of links golf is they don't move much dirt on the best of them, and just the natural bouncing of the ball to me just makes it more interesting. So if I could play in every Open, I would be in every one of them. I think it's the greatest thing in the world. So.
But it's interesting. You went that way. So for me, I went the other way. I grew up on that. So for me to go to kind of parkland golf courses, I mean, when I went and played Oak Hill in the PGA Championship, I think 02 or 03, somewhere like that, when Sean McKeel won. What a golf course that was. I mean, it was so brutally difficult. And you had to place your ball everywhere around the golf course. You had to hit perfect shots. And so that, for me, was an incredible challenge. Probably the hardest golf course I've ever played, ever, was that setup that week at Oak Hill, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I got brutalized. I think I shot 15 over par for the week. Made the cut, but, I think he won at 1 under par. It was incredibly difficult, but the challenge for me was that. It's interesting that you come the other way, into links.
Yes, I mean, obviously, a parkland golf, you kind of have to hit it to here, then you have to hit it to there. And it's a different way of playing, but, it's probably once you grow up with it and you see the other side of it, you always find the other side sort of interesting or new, right? You're sort of rediscovering golf a little bit of, wow, I can hit 8 irons from 109 yards and bound it into there to get it to the pin versus the other direction. But I think that's a great thing about golf, that all of these styles can kind of bring out the best in you, and then can your game adapt to it?
Absolutely. And then that's the great thing about this game. It's not like tennis where you're playing on the same size court in every part, wherever you go around the world. That's the great thing about this game, that you can pick and choose. You can go hard, you can go tough, you can go links, you go park, and go down. And, it's phenomenal. That's what makes this game so great.
The other question I had for you, and I noticed this when I was over there and I was the beneficiary of it, of the kindness and the openness of the clubs in the UK versus the States. So, I was out playing golf at Littlestone and we had a good group with us. And then a member at Rye, we were talking to at the bar afterwards, and he invited us out to play. It seems like there's more access in the UK and it's not quite as closed off. And I'm wondering, what's your thoughts on the, generically speaking, clubs over in the UK and how they're set up? And then B, did that openness of the clubs allowing like a good amateur player like yourself to probably play those different places, how much did that help around your game when you were sort of growing up and getting better and, thinking about becoming a professional?
Oh, interesting question. I think when I was young, we're talking about the early 80s, it was pretty tough for a young guy. There was still, kind of stiff upper lip around, golf clubs around the UK. It was very much rule orientated, as a generational thing. And it wasn't easy. It was only when I really became, an England player, and I won a number of large sort of tournaments, amateur tournaments, I start, to get noticed, and then sort of doors started to open a little bit. I wouldn't say it was easy, back in those days. I think golf in general in this country, obviously has had to change with the times and recession and, austerity and all the rest of it. And a lot of golf clubs are struggling still to get by. But I do think that when you guys come over here, there's a lot of people that have never been to America. And I think that generally Americans are just such nice people when they come over, and you're fun to be around. And I think people enjoy that camaraderie. I mean, I lived in Orlando for 3 years, and I played golf with a bunch of guys there, and I just had a ball, and they were so welcoming, and great fun to be around. In fact, a bunch of us went to the Ryder Cup this year. We went to the last Ryder Cup in the States when you guys killed us. And so I think golf generally, I think, golf is, I keep saying it's such a great game because I think most of the people that play it have a respect for how hard the game is and the rules of the game and all the rest of it. And I think generally nice people play the game. I don't meet too many nasty people playing the game. Maybe I'm just lucky.
Well, yeah, we couldn't, like the clubs over there could have not been more welcoming to us and our group when we were there, and it was a trip of a lifetime. We had such a great time, and, it's such history in the UK of playing golf and being on those hallowed grounds of those courses. It was absolutely incredible. So it was a real, the best. Like I had, after that one, I was completely hooked on links golf, and everything was about when you get to really play real links golf. And thank God in the States now there's an area out, I'm a member at a club out in the middle of Nebraska where it's called Dismal River. That's all in the sandhills. It's right next to sandhills. Right. And you can actually play real links golf where the ball bounces. Where in the States, a lot of the links golf, as you know, live in Orlando. It's sort of pseudo links golf, right? It looks linksy, but you're still flying it up in the air. So yeah, from that point on, I was totally hooked. And it was also the spirit of the people. Like we just had such a great trip. So it was enlightening, to say the least, to be over there and doing it. So yeah, it had an impression on me, that's for sure.
Good.
Walker Cup. You're on the Walker Cup. It's quite an honor on both sides of the pond to be on there with that team. Mm-hmm. I know you guys didn't win, but it still had to be quite special, and you had some great players on your side. You had Harrington, McGinley, Coulthard, guys who played very successfully on the European Tour for a long time, including yourself. Just looking back, how special was that? And is there any great memories of matches you had against the U.S. side where they had some old grizzled veterans, J.C., Alan Doyle, and some real up-and-comers with, Double D and Phil and Bob May and those guys?
It was awesome. I mean, the whole experience was fantastic. It feels like yesterday. It was so amazing. Port Marnock that weekend, the weather was just amazing. We hardly had any wind, not a lot of wind. We had a little breeze, but nothing to speak of. Incredible number of spectators came out. I'd say there were probably 20,000 people, even though, it's supposed to be only 15, but it was more than that. Obviously my first experience of playing against Americans and meeting Americans, was golf. And I was gutted on the first day. I think Jim Payne and myself were going up the last hole. I think we were the second match, and I put him to, I think Double D hit it to about, I want to say 40 feet back right, and the flag was front left, and I was hitting my second shot from the left side of the fairway, so I had to go over a bunker. I didn't hit a bad shot. I hit wedge to about 20 feet. Anyway, I think it might have been Franklin Langham. I'm not 100% sure who it was, but he holed it from the back edge, and Jim Payne missed. We lost one down first match. I was absolutely gutted. Felt like we played pretty good, but to lose, you just don't expect to lose. It's simple. You don't expect to lose. I played Double D in the afternoon, and I beat him 3-2, and we had a good game. I didn't play great tee to green, but I putted really well. And I remember him coming up to my golf bag outside the clubhouse afterwards, and he pulled my putter out of the bag and put it down, took a look at it. He says, "I'm going to snap this." And we laughed and what have you, but great guy, became an incredible player. Incredible talent, very dedicated. I loved the way that he played. And then obviously, day two, we had a chance to win in live play with about 3 or 4 matches left on the course. We actually were just in the lead, but I think the last 4 or 5 matches all went down, and we ended up losing by about 3 or 4 points, I think. But generally, it was an amazing couple of days. Obviously, I got to see Phil play, Bobby May, great guy. I was so pulling for him in that US PGA Championship when he was up with Tiger Woods there. What was it, Valhalla, I think, or something like that.
That's correct, yep.
I mean, I heard a story. I don't know how true this is. I know this is slightly off subject, but I heard that when Bobby May holed that putt on the 72nd hole, I think you hold about I don't know, 15-footer, and the Tiger had like an 8 or 9-footer to tie him. And apparently, when Bobby holed the putt and he picked the ball out of the hole, he turned around and Steve, in Tiger's caddy, went, "Congratulations, Bobby, you got yourself into a playoff." And that's before Tiger's stood over his 8-foot putt. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, and the 8-footer was a double breaker, if I remember right. And he still drained it.
So,
yeah.
I know that's not quite walking up, but I mean, it was just one of those stories. Yeah, I mean, I'd say for any amateur, for me it was a big thing. It was a huge thing. I know some amateurs like Darren Clark, I think he turned pro before the Walker Cup. He didn't bother waiting. But for me, I really wanted to play it. It meant something to me. I'm a bit of a traditionalist. I love the old, a lot of the old school stuff about the game. And I'm a little bit lost for words for where the rulings are going for this game. But Walker Cup was amazing.
Well, yeah, that's at the end here. I have that in my notes. There's a couple issues I would like to get your opinion on, and we'll definitely, it's that you brought that up. We'll get there for sure. Then you go to Q school and you get through all the stages and get your card the first go around, which is impressive and it's hard to do. And so now you're out in the European tour, and there were some real, legends when you got out there in the early '90s, still playing in their prime.
Right.
When you get through there and you're out there and you see Faldo and Seve and Langer, the list just goes on and on and on. Yeah. Icons. Mm-hmm. What's your first impression that you're out competing against these guys, and is it hard not to hero worship or to be, my God, I'm hitting balls next to Sandy Lyle?
Oh, yeah.
And how do you talk yourself out of that? Because you've earned your way out there. You've had a hell of an amateur career. You've won at a high level in the amateur career. You should be out there. How does that balance sort of work?
It was bonkers. I'm not going to lie. It was bonkers. I'm a regular kid from a regular home, and nothing special. And you're absolutely right. You're teeing up with your heroes. Seve, Lyle, Langer, Faldo, Woosnam, Lazabelle. One of the things that blew my mind, and it give you an idea of how cool a guy he is, I remember when I came back from surgery, I think it was end of 94, or might have been 95, I can't remember, but I got drawn with Bernard Langer and Fred Couples at the German Masters, first 2 rounds. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm in Germany, I'm playing with Bernard Langer, number 1. I'm playing with Fred Couples, like Masters champion, like number 2, and it was, you try and you focus and you go and play, but you're watching them and you're enjoying watching them, and I'm not going to lie, I loved playing with all of those guys. I loved it. I loved being that close and talking to them and getting to know them, and just watching them do their craft. I played with Tom Watson at the German Masters, as well. What a ball striker. Unbelievable. But Freddie was so cool. He knew that I was coming back from wrist surgery, and I didn't play well. I think I shot like a couple of 74s and I missed the cut, and they both made the cut. And 6 months later, I think I was out in Thailand playing at Johnny Walker or something like that, and Freddie was there, and I walk on the putting green and just minding my own, and Freddie was there, and he comes over to me and says, "Hey Gaz, how's the wrist?" Now, I'm a nobody. I am a nobody. And for him, to remember my name and to make the effort to bother to come and say hello and how's my wrist, that's mind-boggling for me. That's just so cool. And I think that, I just count myself as extremely lucky, extremely fortunate. I had a very average career. I had a career that I was never happy with. Obviously, I didn't feel that I delivered what I was capable of, and that was basically due to the wrist surgery and everything else. But I did manage to live out my dreams and play with people and chat to these guys on and off the golf course. And I can't tell you how how much I respect them and how much I appreciate that opportunity. It was an absolute pleasure. All of the guys were, Faldo was a strange cat. I mean, really strange cat. I mean, we were managed by the same management company, had the same manager, and we had very similar amateur careers. And some days he would be very friendly and almost treat me like a protege. And then other days, you'd walk past him in the clubhouse and he wouldn't even say hello to you. He was a very strange cat, like that. But that was his way. He had to shut himself off from everybody else. And that's, he's admitted that. And now, of course, he's got a very successful career, announcing and comes across as, laugh a minute. But he was nothing like that on the tour. And a lot of my colleagues would look at him and go, who's this guy now? Because they don't recognize him.
Probably the last guy you guys thought would have a career as a professional commentator, right? After playing with him all those years over there.
Absolutely. When we found out that that's what he was going to do, we were like, you can't be serious. I mean, the guy doesn't talk. And he never had a great relationship with the press on this side of the pond. I don't know how he was received over there, but he was never great with the press over this side. But, my hero was Seve, and playing with Seve, and we were sponsored by Boss together, and we went for a few dinners together. And, I'll tell you a wonderful little story if you want to hear it.
Absolutely.
This is just one of my favorite stories ever. This was about 96. We were in Germany, and we were out to dinner with the board, Hugo Boss. And we'd had dinner, and at the dinner there was... from a playing point of view, there was Bernard Langer, Seve Ballesteros, there was an Englishman called Mark Davis who twice won on the European Tour. And there was a young kid called Steve Webster who just turned pro. It was his first year on the tour, first year with Hugo Boss. And Seve's his absolute hero. And this kid's 5'6", good-looking boy. Seve's 6'1", the best-looking guy you've ever seen, and with an aura. And we finished dinner. The board disappeared. It's quite early. It's about 9:30 Friday evening. And the head of sponsorship for Hugo Boss, a guy called Rolf Beiswanger, said, do you guys just fancy a quick beer in the square? So we were like, yeah, sure. It was Friday night. I'd missed the cut. Seve had missed the cut. Mark had missed the cut. But Steve had made the cut. And so we walk out of this little restaurant. We're walking about 100 yards down this alleyway where there's a few little restaurants and cafes. And I'll never forget, there were these two girls, women, sat outside, probably about 40 years of age, beautiful, blonde, all the jewelry on, looking the part. And we're walking along the alleyway. And these two women are staring at Seve. I mean, staring at him, undressing him with their eyes. And Steve is walking next to Seve, and Seve puts his arms around Steve and says, hey, he says, I think they like you, no? Like this. And Steve says, I think they're looking at you, Seve. He says, no, he says, I think they like you. You're young, you're good looking. I think you have a chance, no? Like this. And it was just lovely, right? He just made him feel $1 million. He didn't need to do it, but he's a young kid. So we go into the square. We order a drink, and Steve's having a Coke, and we're all having a beer, and it's quite busy, and there's quite a lot of people around. And suddenly, 2 or 3 girls turn up, close by, and then another 2 or 3 turn up close by, and they're all looking at Seve, and Seve, that smile that he had, and Seve turns around to Steve and says, what time you play tomorrow? He says, 9:30, Seve. He says, it's time you go to bed now. He says, getting a little late, eh? And Steve goes, no. He says, I'm fine, Seve. I'm fine. I'm drinking Coke. I'm absolutely fine. Like, I don't want to go anywhere. I'm fine. No, my friend. If you want to be a champion, you have to go to get your bed, eh? You have to get your sleep. Rolf, call my friend a taxi like this. Anyway, Steve's like nearly in tears. Right? He doesn't want to go anywhere. He wants to hang.
Right, he's hanging with the hero.
Oh, absolutely. So anyway, this was the most beautiful thing. So 10 minutes later, the taxi arrives. Rolf says to Seve, taxi's here. he says, Steve, can you guys, you're taxiing outside life. And Steve like, Seve, I'm fine. I'm staying with you. He says, I tell you what. He says, I feel a little tired too. He says, I'll take you with me. Let's go. Like that. And they both walked off down the alleyway. It was always, Seve always was going. He was never going to hang around. He was never going to go out. But he just teased Steve enough. And they put his arm around and walked back down the alleyway into the taxi, and off they went to the moonlight, But it was lovely the way that he interacted with this young kid. He was just very friendly. He was fun. And he took him under his wing, and they became good friends. And it was just lovely.
That kind of transitions to my next sort of a question, but it's also wondering your observation. I talked to Jesper Parnevik about this, and you can tell he has such fond memories of the European tour in the late 80s and early 90s when he was on there. And he kind of called it like more of a lifestyle. You guys all traveled together, you hung out, so you're just the bar scenes were fun. And I think on this side of the ocean, true golf fans who are really into it like I am and whatnot, there's this reverence for the European tour of that era of, we always picture like Sam Torrance, with a cigarette and a beer, even though he's made the cut on Saturday night because it's just not worth leaving quite yet. Yeah. And like they had a beautiful balance of living life but playing at a high level, and it just looks like you guys had a hell of a lot of fun in that era of the camaraderie and what the European tour was all about in that era. And is that a fair assessment, or is that romanticizing what it was kind of like back then a little too much? Was it, you guys had to play, you had to practice, you had to do it, but was there that element of it as well, of camaraderie and fun?
100%. The absolute fact is that, a few of the guys, Ian Woosnam, Sam Torrance, they loved a beer, but boy, could they play. They could seriously play. My early years, I went out to dinner a few times with a few of those guys, and I was like, wow. Bottle of red, another bottle of red, another bottle of red. And I'm like, no, I can't do this because A, I've never been a drinker, and B, I will be dead tomorrow morning if I participate. But some of these guys, some of the old school, could do that. Now it hurt some people. I think one of the best players that I felt that didn't really make it and should have done better was Wayne Riley. He's now an announcer on Sky. He won the Scottish Open. I think he won the Australian Open, or Australian Masters or something like that. He won a few tournaments, but he was a hell of a golfer, really good golfer. But he just got drawn in by a couple of guys that did like a drink. And, I think that it hurt him. Ultimately, it hurt him. But that's why Faldo, I think, did his own thing and stayed away from everybody. Back in those days, it was very easy. You'd stay in 2 or 3 hotels, all of you. So you'd wander down to the bar at 6:30, and everyone would be in the bar, and then you'd peel off in 3s and 4s and 5s and go off to dinner at different places. And that's how it was. And the Swedes went to dinner with the Swedes, and the Scots went to dinner with the Scots, and the Spanish went to dinner with the Spanish, and that's how it was. It was like a family. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun, and we had a lot of giggles. Jeepers, if I actually sat down and wrote down some of the stories, I could write a hell of a book, but, half of it you just couldn't really repeat, because it's just so, you can't believe that some of these people behaved that way. But they didn't do anything bad. They didn't do anything wrong to people. They just let themselves go a little bit. But they had fun. It was just about having fun, But, playing with Woozy and Lyle, I think Sandy Lyle, yes, he had a funky golf swing, but you've never seen anyone hit. Him and Woosnam, if you put them on the range with a 1-iron, back in the day, the old butter knife, nobody could touch the pair of them. And you got one guy at 6'3" and one guy at 5'3". And both of them hit 1-irons like you just couldn't believe. No one uses a 1-iron now. It was incredible, the talent that some of these guys had back then.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You played in an era where I mean, talk about the star power and the quality of those players on that European tour and Hall of Fame type careers. It's actually pretty crazy if you just start naming off all of them, of the guys you played against, of how good for an extended period of time those guys were, and how, it's actually pretty amazing of the star power that tour had in that era.
Well, the European Tour made a big mistake back in, I want to say kind of the late 90s, early 2000s. You had Langer, Lyle, Faldo, Woosnam, all turning sort of 46, 47, 48. And back then, what they should have done, they should have turned their senior tour into a 45 years and older tour and forgot about the 50 and just done it for themselves, because ultimately, the senior tour in Europe, why couldn't they do that? They should have done that, because that senior tour with those names would have been absolutely mind-blowing. And would have gained an awful lot of exposure and a lot of attention, but they didn't do it. And as a consequence, a few of the guys stopped playing. A few of the guys went to go play in the States, eventually. But they could have had an incredible, 4 or 5 year window of success with the names that they had, but they didn't.